My name's Dave DeBow, founder of MoneyPartnerFormula.com, and this show is built for everyday real estate investors who are actively doing deals and looking to scale using other people's money. So if you're an active real estate investor and you want to get featured on this show to talk about your own real estate and capital raising experiences, then just go to daveinterviewsyou.com. Now let's get rolling with this episode, and remember to subscribe for daily interview content. Welcome back, folks, and let me ask you a question. Have you ever kind of gotten frustrated with the lack of deals that you're finding on the MLS, or if you're really trying to find deals through realtors, everybody wants retail value. Plus, you're supposed to jump through all the hoops and get qualified for financing to purchase these kind of properties. Have you ever thought, hey, you know what? It would be awesome if I could just get some creative financing, some seller financing, some creative type deals? Well, if you've thought that, you're in the right place today, because today's special guest, zooming in from beautiful New York, is Mr. Edward Santana. And Edward has a ton, and I mean a ton, of experience doing creative deals. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, Edward, you've done or you've been involved in thousands of them over the years. Is that correct?
Hundreds for sure, depending on the scenario. So yeah, but creative finance deals is a strength for sure.
Yeah.
Um,
So well, maybe give us a definition for folks that aren't familiar with what does creative financing mean to you? What are some of the different scenarios?
right. Yes, Dave. So I mean, at the end of the day, anything that pretty much goes around the traditional methods of buying properties. So typically, you go to a bank, you get a loan. Right now, for example, a good credit score will get you a 6%, 7% interest rate on a 200, probably $400,000 property, right, which is insane. Now, most banks are not even approving you. So the idea of creative finance is finding a way that you don't have to go through those traditional channels. And instead of going to the bank, you can actually have, for example, the seller itself. You can turn the seller into a bank, which is somewhat of a seller finance or owner financing. There's something called subject to, which is pretty much you just take over the mortgage as is. So there's different methods in which you can actually buy properties without having to use your credit, without having to use your cash, no credentials, to be honest, because you just use everything that's already in place.
And I tell you what, it definitely works. I haven't done anywhere near the volume of deals that you've done, Edward, but way back in the early 2000s, after living overseas for a number of years, I came back to Canada and got one of those how to get rich quick in real estate courses from a guy
Love
named
those.
Ron LeGrand, who I'm pretty sure you're familiar with. And it was all that stuff. And everybody said that won't work here in Canada. Well, guess what? It does.
Yeah.
It might not be as plentiful in Canada as in the States, but this stuff definitely works. So, okay, so we got the big picture. It's a way to do real estate without having to work with the banks. You're working with the property sellers, and you're creatively structuring deals, either making them the bank or, as you mentioned, kind of taking over their mortgage, subject to. So maybe for folks that aren't familiar with that, what does subject to actually mean? Are you having to go in after the fact and qualify for the mortgage? What does subject to the underlying mortgage mean to you?
Right. So that's the beauty of the stuff, is that you don't have to qualify for any of it. So the mortgage is there in place. So for example, I have a $2.2 million house. This is in a place called Southport, Connecticut. That $2 million house had a 3.2% interest rate. So instead of me having to go get a loan from the bank to pay off that mortgage, which makes absolutely no sense because there's a 3% interest rate as opposed to the 6, 7% that would have gotten at the time.
Yeah.
So now I take that mortgage as is. So that loan becomes mine. Now I make the payments on the property, and I can actually, what we actually ended up doing with that property was putting a tenant and doing a wraparound. So we seller finance the property to that person. So the beauty about creative finance is, I tell my students this all the time: if you can think about it, if you can think it, you can do it.
Yeah.
There's a method to do anything. That particular deal, we bought the property creatively and we sold the property creatively.
Okay, well, let's unwrap that a little bit, because a lot of our listeners are American, a lot of them are Canadian as well.
Sure.
And for Canadians, we have several disadvantages. One of them is when you get a mortgage, it might be a 25, 30, 35-year amortization,
Okay.
but it's only a 3 to a 5-year term, which means at the end of that term, you have to get it. You don't cancel the mortgage, but it gets renewed at whatever the interest rate is at the time,
Really?
which sucks big time. So the
Yeah,
big
it does.
advantage you have for that, let's just use that $2.2 million property as an example, right? What do you remember what the underlying mortgage amount was on that?
And they just got the property. They had it for
Oh,
like about 9 months, and the wife passed away, unfortunately.
oh, wow.
And
Wow.
the gentleman couldn't afford. So she was a doctor. The lady that passed away, she was a doctor. She had a ton of money coming in. He was a stay-at-home father. So when she passed, he obviously couldn't keep the
Wow.
mortgage anymore.
Yeah.
So it honestly, I took it. It was negative because 2.2 was the expected value on it. But the most that I could have offered at the property had I bought it in cash, which I wasn't gonna do at that price or that
Yeah.
interest rate. It would have been maybe 1.8 million,
Mhm.
but the property itself is still over at 1.9. So he would have had to come out of pocket.
Yeah.
So that's
So,
the
so
worst
the
part.
amount owing on it was 1.9 at that point.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah,
correct?
something of that nature. It was
Yeah. So,
definitely negative equity wise.
yeah.
So he's tried to sell this property, which is what the agent told him, that he had to go into foreclosure. I told him that's not true. I can
Mhm.
take over the property with subject to, and even the agent didn't know that you can do this, which
Yeah.
is funny because this is not something that's just publicized all the time. I had to ask him because the his name was Victor, the gentleman that was in foreclosure and pre-foreclosure. So I told him, how did you get the loan? And he had it with a 0% down payment. So
Oh,
this is something
wow.
that's given to the USA veterans. So I mean, it's good for him because he could come
Mhm.
out of no money in the pocket to get the property. But then trying to sell the property, it's flipped even more.
Yeah.
So
Cause then you have to
he would
pay to sell
correct.
the property because the realtor needs to get paid somehow, right?
Yeah,
And all that
you
stuff.
have about 6%, 6% in closing just for the both realtors. Then you have about a 4% on the closing table itself.
Yeah.
Then you had to pay. In his case, he had a bunch of arrears over $30,000.
Oof.
So I ended up getting one of my private money lenders to lend the $30,000 for that deal
Bring it
closing.
up to snuff to get the
Mm-hmm.
bank happy again. Okay, cool.
Correct.
This is an awesome example. Unfortunate situation, but these are the kind of things that happen where you can get in creatively and not because sometimes people think if you're getting into a creative deal, then you're raping and pillaging the seller. But no, usually you're helping them out because they can't
Absolutely.
sell the property traditionally. They'd have to come out of pocket. The guy was already looking at going into bankruptcy. He was already behind 30 grand on his payments because his deceased wife was the money maker. She was the
Yeah.
one making the money to pay the mortgage. Okay, so you went in there, and the nice thing is that mortgage was whatever $2 million, but it was over a probably a 30-year or
30
35
years. Yeah.
year
30 years.
amortization. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the length that is locked in at that 3.2%, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So now you've got it. You get into a $2 million property with 30 grand of somebody else's money to bring up the arrears. Now you or your corporation is the owner on title. However, the mortgage, if I'm not mistaken, stays in the name of the original owner, correct?
That is
You
correct.
don't assume that mortgage.
Right. So and that's a tricky part because people kind of mistake assuming a loan with a subject to mortgage. You
Yeah.
can't. It's not the same thing. When you do a subject to, yes, the deed gets transferred over to us, but the mortgage itself stays under that person's name. The way that you would think of this is kind of like there was somebody that can't remember his name, but he explained this perfectly. It's like if you go to a grocery shop and you take, let's say that you take a credit card or Chase Bank,
Yeah.
you swipe your card for $100. Now you have $100 worth of products, and I say, here, Dave, these are going to be for you. Now I give you the $100 worth of products and a receipt. That receipt is stating that you are the owner of the products.
Yeah.
But that card, I still have to pay it. So this is the way that you would think of a subject too. I still owe the debts. The debt's still under my name. You have the property now. Why? Because you have a receipt saying that you have the property. That
Yeah,
makes
that's a good
sense.
explanation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love the
Yeah.
explanation. I heard
I
that
like
first time.
that
Like,
one
that
too.
makes a lot of sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. Now the question in some people's mind is going to be, why the hell would the bank put up with that? Like they they loaned the money to one guy. Now he's given away the property. He's given away the deed to the property. and the mortgage is still in his name, why would the bank agree to that? Is what's I know the answer, but some people are probably going to think that.
So of course, and that comes to everybody's mind when this is spoken about, and this is when people start thinking, well, this must be illegal, because at
Mhm.
the end of the day, I actually try to do everything for the bank not to know. Reason being is, think of it in that same scenario. When I just told you I gave you the groceries, do I have to call the bank and say, listen, I just used $100 of your money and I gave the groceries to Dave? No, they don't have to know about this. At the end of the day, I'm still making the payments. Now, a lot of times what happens is, in his case, for example, to your point earlier, you mentioned that people might think, well, you're trying to take advantage of people like this. That's not true. This man was going into foreclosure, messing up his credit in New York, in the United States. I don't know how it is in Canada, but in the USA, you mess up your credit for about 7 years. That's when you
Yeah.
can start reestablishing your credit. So that's a negative off the bat. In his case, I actually gave him $5,000 for emergency cases. On top of that, I paid for his moving cost. So it was a huge benefit for me. So today, Victor still calls me to see how I'm doing. Yesterday, he called me Sunday, he called me for Father's Day here. So you built these beautiful relationships with these people because you genuinely helped them out.
Yeah.
So, and continue with the point of the subject too. In this case, I actually had to speak to the agent, because the agent said, when I told them, well, the bank doesn't have to find out. The guy said, oh, this is illegal.
Mm.
Victor, don't get into this stuff. I said, hold on. Victor is a veteran. He has a VA loan. He says that you have his paperwork. Is that correct? Yes. Okay, so read his legal paperwork from the USA, from the states. The Veterans Affairs shows you how to structure a subject to deal. That's how legal it is. It is legal in all 50 states. So, and
Wow.
that's the only reason that the guy was able to actually confirm and get back to us. So, the reason why the banks would actually let this happen is because, had Victor continue on going to the path that he was going through, he was going to lose the house. No bank wants to repo the house.
No.
They don't want to do this. So me, what I'm doing is actually going in. If whatever case, it never has actually happened that the bank actually calls us. But if they ever did, they well, I got to tell the bank, listen, my name is Edward Santana. This is my company. We're taking over the deed. Do you prefer that we keep it in the name of the person right now and you go into foreclosure, or you prefer us making the payments? Now, keep in mind, it's not even me who's making the payments. I'm making the payments to a third party company called a servicing company. The servicing company is a third party company. They make the payments to the bank.
Nice.
So even if the seller wanted to get another property later on, we can actually have them to call the credit bureau and let them know someone else is making the payments, so they can actually deduct that money from the accounts.
That's huge.
It's
That's
beautiful.
huge.
It's like
That's really good.
it literally is a win-win situation in this case.
Yeah.
In most cases.
Okay, so let's walk around the other side of the deal. So now you've got it tied up. You're out of pocket. You and your investors out of pocket, whatever, 40 grand, right? To do this, but you got a 12 million, $2.2 million property with a lot of debt on it right now. So
Yeah.
how does Edward turn that into a money maker? What did that
Oh
other
man,
side of the equation look like?
Dave, this can go on for hours. It was
Well,
a
give us the
headache.
big broad strokes, my friend.
It was a headache because this area, we don't. It's not a place where people would like to rent properties. My idea was to rent it. It's a
That's
very
a
rich,
$2.2 million property. That's, you
right?
better be
So,
a
but we
rock
thought,
star to rent that,
we
man.
could probably just put it like an Airbnb or whatever the case was. Later on, we just found this person who wanted to move. He actually comes from Albania, has a ton of money, has a construction company back home, and he has money, but is new in the USA, has no credit.
Hmm.
So one of my associates called me, was like, Edward, is that property still available in Connecticut? I said, yeah, it is. So he says, I have a guy that wants to buy it. Like, oh, you sure? Because it's pretty pricey. So he gives me the guy's number. The guy calls me, says, so I have money, but I don't have credit. Michael tells me that you can actually sell me the property and I can make payments to you.
Yeah.
I said, yes, we can do that. So this is where the wraparound comes in. I had the control of the property.
Yeah.
Now I'm reselling it to this gentleman at a higher interest rate.
At a
And
higher
higher than
price, at a higher price too, or just
a
the
higher
interest rate?
price point, higher monthly payment than what I'm paying, obviously, and a higher interest rate.
Okay.
And $100,000 down payment.
Nice.
Because typically what you will look at, and I should tell you exactly what the number was.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Let's say,
10% down would be 220,000,
yeah, but the banks
right?
typically will ask you for 20% down, right? So we're
Yeah,
looking at about $400,000.
yeah,
So when I told them, well, typically the down payment will be 20% on the banks. And they said, how much is that going to be? Like, oh, 400,000. I mean, yeah. So he looked at me and said, oh, I can't give you that. I can give you 100,000. I said, fine. Honestly, Dave, I didn't care about the down payment. Had he given me 50,000, I'd be fine with that. So
yeah. Well, I mean, for that size
100,000
of
more.
property, you do want something. You want some skin in the game. That's for sure.
Yeah, of course. But the
Yeah.
thing, the way I saw it was, if this guy keeps making a payment, this is the beautiful stuff about this. And the contractor will state, if he doesn't make the payments for X amount of time, let's say a month or two, I can revert the property back to myself. So I can take him out of the property and then it goes back to my name.
So with this arrangement with the end buyer, up here we've got something we call in some certain places an agreement for sale.
Mhm.
It's so they don't actually get registered on title until the thing completes. Is that kind of how you've got it structured, or is the deed going over to them and you're now like the bank and you've got I don't even
So,
know if it would be a second position mortgage on the
right,
property, I guess. Yeah.
right. So that could have been done the way that you just mentioned right now, but no, the way that you first mentioned, here we call it a land contract.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
a land contract would typically with selling the property on a seller finance, but the deed stays in title.
Yeah.
So let me explain that. So title company, so closing company, they keep the deed in the property at that point. When the property has reached X amount of money that they've paid us, then they will get sent the deed to that person. So at this point, if I had to get the property back, now it would be a foreclosure.
Hmm.
However, before they pay X amount of money, if I were to have to get the property back, it would be an eviction. It's a lot more smoother process, if that makes
Nice.
sense.
Well, it makes a ton of sense. Yeah, for sure. Very cool. So, a couple of questions that come to mind with this kind of transaction. First of all, how much money do they have to pay you, or how long do they have to be making payments before it switches into the deed goes to them? That's the first question. So, how did that look?
So if I'm not mistaken, I honestly don't even know. So we have, and this is the beauty about like me. I'm the kind of person that I'm always all over the place.
Yeah,
I'm always the one finding the properties, talking to people,
you're
connecting. I
doing
have a
good.
mastermind program, teaching people, etc. So I have attorneys and I have people that these guys would be the one. For example, I have this lady that when we spoke last time, she took all these notes and posted it right after the meeting, posted it into the group. Even put the books that we recommended, everything. In my mind, I think is like, how the heck do people do this? My mind doesn't work this way, you know?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
I always tell people, if you don't know something, find people that do.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken, it is about half the payment to the property that's to be made before it changes. But this is something that has happened with our Pennsylvania properties, which are way cheaper, 200,000, 100,000, 300,000.
Yeah.
So that's how it's been. You would typically pay about half the payments and then the deed gets transferred to them. I'm not sure if that's an accurate number. 50% equals that.
Mhm.
I would be able to find out. We could actually tag if you wanted the comments.
Mm.
But
Yeah, no, just out of curiosity. Okay, so let's say it is 50%. Do you remember more or less what the length of time is for the agreement that you've got with the gentleman? Is it 20 years, 30 years? What's
no, it would
the
have been the 30 years.
30 years? Yeah, same
Mhm.
as the original mortgage.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it didn't have that much time. It had like 8, 9 months before they sold to us. So
So
whatever
it's going to
time
take
frame,
him
whatever just that
whatever
actually.
15 years to where the title gets transferred in his name. What if he wants to sell the property in the meantime? How does that kind of look?
Well, he won't be able to sell the property, and that's part of the things you will. It depends, of course. Now, the thing with creative finance is that again, it's creative, so
Yeah.
everything can be changed. It goes from situation to situation.
Yeah.
So I have this is thing called the due on sale clause.
Mhm.
Due on sale clause is pretty much something that the banks will be able to trigger to avoid the subject to deals. Meaning, if the deed gets transferred to me and the bank notices this, they can trigger what's called the due on sale clause. And that means that all the money that property is owed will be owed at signing.
Mhm.
So the land contract is actually one way they go around that. I actually put this on my seller finances. So the properties in Pennsylvania, the single family properties that I'm getting rid of, all of them, when I'm doing a seller finance, they will have a do on sale clause on them also. That will stop the seller from selling it to somebody else. Because at the end of the day, you
from
have to
doing a
protect
creative
yourself.
deal with somebody else.
Well, to do any deal. Because the moment
Okay,
that the deed is transferred, then I will know.
right. But but in a certain way, wouldn't it be okay for you? Because I think the average is a person stays in a home 6 or 7 years and then
Mhm.
sells and moves kind of thing. So at that point, wouldn't you get cashed out the higher price that they were supposed to pay anyhow? But you're missing
So
out on the interest, on the
right,
difference.
and
Yeah,
which honestly, the interest is the main thing that you want to keep, right? That's where
yeah,
the big money's at. So it all depends again from situation. In this particular scenario, I I wouldn't do a. I don't like doing wraparound contracts to somebody else when I owe the subject to.
yeah.
Reason being is because I already made an agreement with the people. One thing, going back to the point of earlier, how this helps people. I hate being the guy that tells you something and does something else.
Yeah.
If I look at you in the eye and say, listen, I'm going to help you out, I'm going to help you. So I try to avoid any situations as much as possible. So I know this guy, I interview this guy, the new buyer. So I know who I'm putting there. If he finds somebody else, I don't know who that person is. I don't know
Exactly.
if they're going to pay. I don't know what's going to happen in that case.
Hmm.
Now, if they were to, if this is your question, if they were to cash out the deal and do like let's say a refinance or whatever the case and pay me out of it, then yes, that's that you can do that.
Okay. Well,
Yeah. So
I'm just wondering, like, if they wanted to list it with a realtor and sell it and
yeah,
be
or
done
they
with
can
it.
definitely do that if they can
Yeah.
if they can get more than what the property is worth, which it has to because I'm selling it to them at a higher price point.
Hmm.
So if they can pay that price point now, then yeah, sure, they can do that.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
I just don't
Yeah. That
want them
was,
to do another creative deal with somebody else. You know what I'm saying?
I get that. Yeah. 110%. Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Edward, well, thank you for walking us through that. That was very, very interesting and enlightening. And I know a lot of people are interested in doing these kind of deals. So uh, if people want to find out more about you and connect with you, what should they do?
They can find me on Facebook. So Edward Santana 94. I'll pop up probably with a blue shirt, a blue dress shirt, I believe it is. So yeah, you could definitely reach out to me there. Message me. I definitely answer my messages, and we can connect there.
Awesome. Very good. Well, thank you very much for walking
Thank
us
you for
through
having me,
that
Dave.
big creative deal. That's a beauty.
Appreciate it.
All right, everybody, take care. Talk to you on the next episode. Hey there, I really hope you enjoyed that episode. And as always, if you want to listen to more daily interview content, make sure you subscribe. And if you're an active real estate investor and you're doing deals and you'd like to get featured on this show, then just head over to daveinterviewyou.com. Now, at moneypartnerformula.com, we help real estate investors to create a process for predictably getting capital so they can do more deals without relying on hard money lenders or the banks. We do this by building them a private capital marketing system. Now, if you want help turning yourself into a big money capital attraction machine, then book a call with our team to see how we can help. Just visit moneypartnerformula.com to find out more. All right, take care, and we'll see you on the next interview.